Welcome everyone to video 1.2. This is part 5 of 10 of the tax company PC procurement project. So just to ground us in where we left off, I had all these notes written up from the last call that we were at with Bill and also the manager Ted and all those lovely accents I was doing. So at the end of it, we figured out that Bill really wants to use corporate email and a corporate website and a corporate domain, which was Bill's Tax Haven. We figured out the printer thing because he's going to want us to put together a network card for the printer so we can have it shared on the network. We figured out the phone system. Well, we figured out that he wants a phone system, I should say, instead of just using his cell phone. We talked him out of using the shared Wi-Fi solution, which means that we need to actually procure some kind of circuit for him with some kind of Wi-Fi solution. We talked about using the desktop, which is going to run QuickBooks Pro. Really the biggest driver, a driver is basically a biggest reason for using a desktop was based on QuickBooks Pro, which is something that he looked into as far as the different features of QuickBooks Pro versus QuickBooks Online. Excuse me. And QuickBooks Pro was something that he felt had a bunch of features as far as multiple customer support and things of that nature. And so even though the online version is easier to use, in this particular case, there are some cases where the desktop version of the software may actually have extra features. So even though it's easier to just throw out everything up in the cloud, in this particular case, we decided that it was actually better to run the software locally on his desktop. But there's ways you can still back everything up to the cloud and even have things hosted there and things of that nature. So that's kind of what we figured out. This software is cloud-based. This software, as far as the ADP payroll, is also cloud-based. Office, we figured out pricing for that as far as using Office 365. And then the printer, we figured out the network card. Faxing is going to be bundled into the phone system. We talked about what their employees are going to be doing, that they're mainly just going to be other tax accountants. One is more junior level, two are more senior level. They're going to all get the same laptops. And then really for Bill also, we figured out he's going to have a laptop too, so really it's going to be 4 laptops. And really just to make it simple, we should have them all have the same laptops because then we can have one standard configuration, so it's much easier to maintain and troubleshoot those laptops. And then for extra backup, we're also going to have a UPS, which is an uninterrupted power supply for the desktop. And I explained that to Bill as this similar to a battery for a laptop, so that if you unplug the power, if you lose power, the really valuable desktop doesn't just automatically shut down and maybe inexplicably corrupt the QuickBooks file. It has all their sensitive data, so the UPS will allow the desktop to stay up for a little bit so you can shut it down appropriately. So at this point, I don't think we need any further input from Bill because he already, answered all our questions. So now we need to put together a quote or a proposal for Bill. So in order to do that, first thing you want to do is you want to reach out to your manager and let them know that you're ready to do this and that you really want to ask your manager if they have some kind of template, because there's no reason in you having to come up with everything if the company has a standard template for how they put proposals together. And you'll hear the term template or boilerplate. It's just basically saying a standard document that they always use so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel and create all the formatting from scratch. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So from the trainee email, I'm going to send an email to Ted, who's my manager, and I'm going to say, templates for proposal. Hi Ted, I was wondering if there were any templates or boilerplate documents I can use for the proposal, or would you prefer I make one from scratch? And I'm just going to say, can I use for the proposal for bills tax haven? You want to be specific because, you know, this manager may be working with other technicians also, so you want to make it easy on the manager, so remind him of what project we're talking about. So that's it. I'm just going to ask Ted if, hey, are there any boilerplates or templates that I can use, or do I want to make one from scratch? And really, you're just not saying I can't do it, but you're just saying, if you don't have a template, I'll make one from scratch, but you want to give your manager the opportunity to make sure they can give you a template if they have one. So I'm going to go ahead and send that out. And then over on the manager's email, you're going to see this now. So as the manager, I'm going to think, oh, wait a second, do we have a template? Oh yeah, you know what, we do. Let me go ahead and find out, you know, where that is. So under training, if we look under templates, we have all these different templates, which is, one is a service quote. We have all these other things which are going to be used as part of the project deliverables. So you recall we were talking about creating a statement of work, a design document, the bill of materials, a project plan, project tracker. We're going to put all these together. So I'm going to reply back as the manager. So I'm going to just copy this path, copy address as text. If you go up to any path, you can just right click and do copy address as text. So I'm going to go ahead and reply from Ted Trainee saying, hi Trainee 01. Yes, we do have standard templates. You will find them located at. So the reason I'm just saying T /templates is we all have a standard that our T drive is going to be mapped to the training folder, which this templates folder is underneath that. So this is assuming that everyone has the same type of map drive. Remember, we could have also done that UNC path of file mn550 prod01 / training. You know, we could do that type of structure. Which I'll show you just so you have it, but if I wanted to do this, eventually I can get to the same exact path that way. So if I go to training, I can get the templates here. So if I right click on this and do copy address as text, I can just paste that in here if I do Control V. So you can see, you know, there's multiple ways to do it. You can send them a UNC path, or you could send them the actual map drive, which assumes that they're the map drive. So this is technically safer because even if someone doesn't have this T drive map, they can always go to the UNC path. But the UNC path is also a little bit more cumbersome, so depending on your environment, if you know that people have map drives, then you can just send them this. So for now, I'm just going to send them this. So there we go. So now, as Trainee 01, I can see, oh, great. So I've gotten my location of the template. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my T drive. I say, oh, I didn't know that. I'm going to go to my T drive, and oh yeah, look, there's a templates folder. Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually create some kind of folder structure that makes sense for me as the implementation engineer. So I'm just going to copy this whole templates folder, and I'm going to, go to training and then trainees. And so I'm going to go to TED trainee. So this is under your name, right? So I'm just using TED trainee as this initial example. So whatever your actual name is, so if you're Steve Johnson, you'd have a Steve Johnson folder in here. So I'm just going to paste the templates folder in here. So at this point you have your template, and you don't want to really make changes to the template. That's just going to always be in here. So I'm going to create another folder in here called projects. And again, you want to make this on the server. You don't want to make these folders on your local desktop, because again, your desktop isn't backed up. So if your hard drive died or something happened with your operating system, you would lose that work. If you put the stuff on the server, it's going to be backed up, and it's central also. So it's much easier to share when something's on the server. And I'm showing you how to put something on the file server, which is different than putting it on OneDrive. OneDrive is on the cloud. The file server is on premises. It's actually a server that's physically here in our data center. And you'll see both. I mean, in most Fortune 100 companies, you'll see file servers are more popular because they can just be bigger in a internal company, and they have more control and less latency. Basically, it's just faster if you're in the same location. But the smaller you get, like a mid-sized company or smaller, you'll start seeing more and more people getting away from physical file servers and using OneDrive, some kind of cloud solution. So for now, we're going to use the file server. So under projects, I'm going to create some subfolders. I'm going to create an open and a closed. And this is so that you can keep track of how many projects are currently open that you're working on and how many have been completed. So you'll move them to the closed folder. So under open, I'm going to create one called Bills Tax Haven. So inside of here, I'm going to actually go back to here, and I'm going to copy templates. So I'm putting there so that I can edit them and I can copy them and work with them inside of here without fear of editing the original template. Because what you don't want to do is accidentally edit the template, because then it's not as useful for the next project, because it's going to have all the crap from your current project. So the point of a template is it's just something you can use to save yourself time. So a lot of the formatting and wording may be in there already, so it's just easier to work with, right? So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the service quote template. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it out here. So I'm going to say service quote bills tax haven. I don't know what that's all about. Let's try that again. Okay. For some reason it's getting an error. I'm just going to try and open this file and see if it works. Okay, so it's letting me open it. I'm just going to try to save it from here. Not quite sure what was going on there. Okay, so I'm having some network permissions issues right now for some reason. So looks like the file permissions that were on this particular folder isn't letting me save this. So this is actually something that could happen in the real world too. So it's letting me copy the files back and forth, but it's not letting me actually save changes that were made into this folder, which is really kind of odd. Which I'm going to choose to use this as a troubleshooting technique. So if this ever happens, then what you could do is you can actually save them locally for now, and then you can figure out whatever was happening on the network side or on the folder permission side separately, and then you can work on that later. So for right now, I'm going to just copy this service quote onto my desktop. I'm just going to rename it here. Because you want to make sure it's not really something related to the file itself. So for some reason there's some file permission issues on the file server side where my user Ted Trainee isn't able to actually do that. As a test, I'm also going to try and map as a different user. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this drive. I'm going to close out all my files first, actually. So I am going to disconnect both of these. And I'm going to connect back again. I'm going to connect map network drive, but I'm going to actually connect using a different credential than I did before. So I'm going to pick the T drive again. So I'm going to actually log in as a test, and just to show you guys that this is what happens when you have an issue with permissions. Is I'm going to log in with Transcend IT, which is a domain / I'm just going to use my actual login here, which this is just a test. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to go into here. So I've got my projects, Bill Open projects, Bill's Tax Haven. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this file here. I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to see if I can save as now that I have a user with higher permissions. So I'm going to say service quote Bill's Tax Haven. Okay, so you can see right there. Hopefully that wasn't super confusing, because that wasn't necessarily the main point of what I was trying to do there. Was I was trying to just have you rename that file, but we ran across a file permissions issue, which is not even covered in this topic. It's something for the future, but things happen. It's in IT, you just have to kind of roll with it and figure it out. So you can see that I was able to rename that file when I logged in as Adrian, but when I logged in as Ted Trainee, I was not able to. So I'll follow up on that later, and that's something that it's good to see that it's a way to test it. Also, if you have issues where one user can do something and they're getting a file permission error, and you log in as a different user or yourself, and you see that it works, then you know that you can go into Active Directory, which is a whole nother topic, and you can fix those file permissions, right? So for right now, we'll just kind of move forward. And also, one other thing I forgot is I generally create an archive folder. Oops. archive. And that's a place that I can put older versions of documents. So I'm just going to put this template in here also. And I'm also going to rename this as underscore version 1.0. And you might be wondering why I want to do that, and that's because if I make changes, I can number it to version 1.1, 1.2, and if it's a major change, then I can make it 2.0. And that all is very helpful. If I email this document out to someone, I can ask them like, well, you know, what version of the document do you have? Because one of the worst things ever is if you send someone a document and it's just called service quote bills tax haven, but you've made several changes to it, how do you actually know which one they've got? You can do things like look at the date and time, that's the, you know, when the file was written to, and stuff like that, but you know, it's not 100% safe, because what if they've changed their time accidentally or some crazy thing like that? If you're actually looking at the name of the actual file, that's actually much easier. So using a version number is actually really helpful with files, so it's a good habit to get into. It's just like creating folders. It's just a way to stay organized. So at this point, I've got this service quote. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. So this is my template, right? So you can see it's got a lot, it's just sort of placeholders in here, right? So this is part of what you get for a boilerplate or a template, is it doesn't have anything specific in it. So I'm going to start with just starting to fill it out. So the logo, right? I'm going to click on the logo, click this right here. I'm going to update the logo. I'm going to change the picture in it. So I'm going to search for, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this stuff up. So this company is called Artisan Consulting. So I'm going to pick a goofy, you know, icon for Artisan. So yeah, I'll just say this one right here. All right, so that's my logo, right? Obviously, you're going to find your actual logo from your company if you're going to make some kind of quote. So this is going to be your company name that you're representing. So Artisan Consulting. I'm going to make up a slogan where solutions are always custom. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up here. So we're going to use our address. So it's going to be 550 Vandalia Street, Suite 302. And it's going to be in St. Paul, Minnesota 55114. The phone number I'm going to say is 612-222-2222. The fax number is going to be 651-222-3333. I'm just making stuff up. So email I'm going to say is info@artisanconsulting.com. So there's always an invoice number, so I'm just going to call it invoice number 1002. So the date of the invoice is going to be today. I don't know why expiration is spelled this way, but I'm just going to do that. So you generally want to use just kind of a simple convention. Actually, you know what? Since everything is capital here, the date and the invoice, I'm going to do capital here too. So here we go. So I'm going to click the expiration date. So I'm going to say that generally your quote is good for about a month or so. So I'm going to say, you know, the 16th of April. So they have, you know, well over a month to decide. Generally, it's way less than that, because I'm going to follow up with Bill in a few days just to make sure that we've answered all their questions. So company name is going to be Bill's Tax Haven. And if we go back, we need to look at all the info that was, so we need to go back to our email. If I was trainee 01, I need to go back to the email that my manager sent me, because it's got all the details as far as what the address was and all that. So I can just copy that. So I'm just gonna copy. Here's a little useful thing. So when you actually paste, like if you just do Control V, you notice how it's gonna put the formatting in as whatever formatting I copied from, which is kind of annoying because you can see this is like red and it's a different font. If you look at home, you can see this is Arial size 10. This is whatever the heck that is, Troubleshooting MS 8.5. So it's got a different font, right? So I'm gonna undo that. So if you do, if you either hit this button right here to undo, or you can hit Control Z. If you right click on here, you can go to the different paste options where you can do text only, you can do merge formatting, or you can keep, and it'll give you a preview. So this is the way it was. But if I wanted to do the text only, then I can have it actually keep the formatting right here, which is really nice. So actually I'm going to copy this part right here for the city, state, and zip. Okay. And then phone number wise, it's right here. So I'm going to copy that, Control C, go into here. I'm going to right click and now paste with text only. There we go. And yeah, as far as the customer ID, I'm just going to say it's number 121. Right, so we basically got our name in here, our address, the customer's name and address. Oh, whoops, actually I was supposed to do Bill Hicks. This is supposed to be Bill's Tax Haven under the company name. So we're going to copy that, go into here, paste that. So this is going to be Bill Hicks. Okay. So here, the salesperson, so in this particular case, you would probably be called more of a pre-sales engineer, meaning you're doing the work before it's completely sold. If you were doing work on a customer that was already existing and already had a system and you were adding to it, that would be a post-sales person. So we're going to put yourself as the salesperson. So trainee 01. And so we're going to say PC, now we're going to call it Bill's Tax Haven Project. Okay, so now this whole quote is basically just an estimate of what it's going to be to get this whole project done, right? So at this point we need to break down which things are one-time costs and which things are software, which things are hardware, which things are telecom, which is like circuits and things like that, and then also our time is an hourly rate. So if we go back to here, and actually if we also open up our I have my Visio that I had created here that you also created. So I had my domain and all that kind of stuff, right? So these were like my key items that I had written down from here of all the different things I had to do. So one of the first things we have to do is GoDaddy domain registration. We need to figure out what that cost was because I can't remember. So we're going to go back to GoDaddy real quick to figure out what the cost was. So it was billstaxhaven.com. So it looks like it's $11.99 to, I'm going to click continue to cart. Yeah, so it's $11.99 plus another $7.99 per year for domain protection, which is a really good idea so that you can't find out Bill's actual information isn't out on the internet. So I'm just gonna say $11.99 plus $7.99. So I'm gonna just open up the calculator. So that's $19.98. So that's quantity of 1 of that. So that takes care of that. So that's going to be $19.98. So that's that part. And then we didn't cover this actually, but you need to have a place to actually host your website. So, I mean, that's hosting the domain right here, but you need to have a place to actually build your website. So there's a couple of really popular ones. Wix is one of the more popular ways to build a website and host a website. WordPress is another really popular one. So this is more of just a side educational thing. You won't be creating websites or anything like that for help desk projects, most likely anyway. So, but just, you know, just for some background, like most of the sites that you'll see, like the smaller business sites, they're going to be using one of these two, Wix or WordPress. These are public ways of hosting websites in a kind of an easy way where you don't need to manually write a lot of code. So, you know, just kind of, this site just explains the two most popular ones, Wix or WordPress. So Wix has more of an ease of use. It's more graphical. WordPress isn't as easy, but it can have more customization basically. So you can, there's more plugins to connect to certain back-end services and other things, like, you know, with this thing's called widgets to connect to, like, there's other CRM software like Salesforce that you can connect to. But if you're just making a really basic site, then, you know, per this article and lots of other things, Wix is probably the easiest way to go, but it has some limits too, right? So there's, if you're doing more advanced things, then WordPress might be the better way to go. If you're doing more basic things, Wix is cheaper and easier, but it's also still very secure. So now that we know we want Wix, then we need to look at the pricing, right? So we're going to say Wix pricing. So let's look at some of these options for Wix. No thanks. So there's always different choices of ways you can host. So if you look at one of these sites, you can start to figure out, like, okay, so you've got, you know, a VIP and e-commerce. This is obviously the most basic right here, and this is the most advanced right here. You can see that there's different storage limits. So you get 500 megs of space basically for files and storage on the most basic one, and a huge amount, 20 gigs here. You've got a limited amount of bandwidth. So if you have 1 gig of bandwidth, you start to become rate limited. So it's kind of like your cell phone provider, where you may only have a certain amount of bandwidth because you're paying for a smaller bill, or you can pay more and get unlimited. There's other things like Site Booster for SEO, which we know we don't care about. Online store, so Bill is not going to be selling anything on an online store. He's not going to be doing any kind of e-commerce. So really Bill's site is very basic. So I would just go with the probably the simple combo price right here. So you can still get 3 gigs of storage, which is plenty. You got quite a bit of bandwidth. You get the free domain with it. You can remove the Wix ad, so it's just something on the bottom that would normally say Wix if you did the really cheap one. So I would just do that. So we'll just say Wix hosting / website. And we'll call it the combo plan, okay? And that is also a quantity of 1. The price is $10 per month. Okay. I'm just going to put per month here just so that it's obvious. And this is a one-time fee right here. I think it was a one-time fee. Yeah, this is per year. So these are both per year. So registering the domain is a one-time thing per year. Or wait, no, per year, not one time, sorry. Per year, I stand corrected. Okay, so certain things are per year, certain things are per month, and then certain things are one time. Okay, so we've got that figured out. So that was per year. I'm just going to remove the cost here because these are basically the same thing. So $10 per month. Okay, so we've got those two things figured out. So next, let's talk about the email because we talked about using the Office 365. So we're going to just close out of this stuff right here. Let's go back to the Office 365 pricing. Let's go back to this one. And you, by the way, you can tell which websites you've been to because it'll be, this is really stupid and obvious, but just in case it wasn't, you see like these sites are not highlighted, or this one shows up as a different color. So that's when you know this purple color versus the blue color. The purple one is when you've clicked on it before. So if you ever go back to a website, you can always tell. And we want to look at for business. And we went back and forth, and I'm pretty sure you recall this, but at the end, factoring in all of the features as far as, you know, needing Exchange email, wanting to have Skype, all the applications, instead of buying them separately, which was, what was it, $200 a year, or $200 one time. It was basically just Bill's choice to go with the higher monthly amount to reduce his overall expenses up front. He wanted to basically reduce his capital expenditure, or CapEx is what they call that. So you'll hear that as far as that, like capital expenditure. So he wants to reduce his CapEx basically, so he's okay with paying a little bit more per month because it's easier to pay that than a big upfront fee, right? So we'll just call this Office 365 email / MS Office / apps. So this is, the apps are basically talking about like OneDrive. I'm going to say OneDrive for storage / apps. So that's going to be pretty obvious. We're talking about all that. So this particular price was $12.50 per user per month. So here I'm going to do a quantity of 4. I'm going to do $12.50. Okay. So that takes care of that. So I'm going to put that in here. So really this is all sort of built in at this point. So I'm going to say not applicable 0365. So there isn't a separate cost, basically. So email and Office is kind of built in together. So next we're going to talk about the phone system. So he mentioned, obviously, he needs some kind of solution that wasn't just his cell phone, because that wouldn't really work very well. So we're going to look up VoIP phone service for business. So again, you can tell this is the one that we went to because it was purple and these are all blue. So you can see different reviews and whatnot for these different companies, and for the most part, they're all going to do very similar things. Nowadays, things are very competitive, but you might as well just check it out. So we talked about all of these different features, and he was very much just wanting something very basic. So as long as it is a highly rated item and the price was decent, we'll just go with that. So Ring Central seems like a really good price, or sorry, really good quality, because it's rated really well, and it was a reader's choice or editor's choice, which means it won an award for being the most stable and whatnot. So let's see how much this costs. So let's see. We've got Essential, Standard, Premium, and Ultimate. And that is per month per user. So we've got unlimited users here. We've got up to 10 users here. There's some limits on the number of video conferencing you can do, but that's not that important because we can do video conferencing using Skype for Business, so that isn't that big of a deal. Internally anyway, with external customers, not so much. Toll-free or local numbers. 100 toll-free minutes per month. You got 2,500 toll-free minutes per month here. So basically, you've just got much bigger video conferencing and much more as far as minutes per month that you can use here. And for 49, you're basically getting 4 times the number of minutes per month. So we just need to find out if Bill will need any more than that as far as how many total minutes per month he's going to be on the business phone line or phone system. So let's check out some of the other ones. So let's see what Vonage looks like. Let's see. Some of them don't show the actual pricing. That's kind of annoying, actually. Let's check this one out. Yeah, a lot of them you need to actually get in touch with someone. So this one's saying it's as low as $19.99 per month, but that's not very helpful. So let's actually try doing a different search. So VoIP phone service price comparison. And by the way, you don't want to click on the ones that are ads because that's not really an objective type of ad or site. It's just going to be something that's promotional for that particular vendor. So you don't want to do that. Okay, let's look at this one. VoIP review. Okay, so this one's got some of the pricing on here. Okay. So looks like unlimited calls and fax from Ring Central is $19.99 per month per user. For Ring Central. So it varies, there are some that are very cheap, like ITP, but then again, if they're $8.32 per month, they may not be the highest quality. And also keep in mind, like in this particular example, I'm just kind of showing you how to research things and whatnot, but in reality, most projects, you're not going to just randomly pick certain things that you find on the internet like this. Your company, Artisan Consulting is going to have a vendor relationship with like Ring Central or maybe Cisco for their phone system, or some of these other vendors like Vonage, and you're gonna basically recommend that. But in this case, this is more of a small company type of feel where we're just going out and researching whatever we think is the best. So it's just something to keep in mind. So we know that calls and faxes are what was important for the customers, so we know that Ring Central will work, and it's $19.99 per month per person. So I'm going to say phone system, Ring Central, call/fax, unlimited. And I'm going to say per month. Okay, just gonna move this over a little bit, and you can move these around so it's a little more room on the description side, and you can even go like this, and just looks a little bit cleaner. So there's gonna be 4 of that because it's $19.95 per user per month, or $19.99. So, and there's no setup fee. Okay, so there's that. So line total is basically saying, taking the unit price times the quantity. So you can say $19.98 here, $10 here. So here, now if you put this in Excel, obviously it would do the calculations for you, but because this is in Word, we have to kind of do it the old-fashioned way. So we're going to we use a calculator. Let's say 1250 times 4, so that's 50. And this one is 19.99 times 4, 79.96. Okay. So $19.99 per month. So now we need to talk about the internet and Wi-Fi situation. So we looked up, we can close out of this stuff actually. Let's see, so we looked up Comcast business internet pricing. So again, we can see that we've clicked on this before. And again, here, if you recall, we talked about the fact that this would be sufficient to be okay, but we mentioned to Bill that, it's only, what, 30% more over here, 69 versus 99, but we're getting 3 times the bandwidth. So, it's a pretty good ratio. That's a good return on investment. So we went with the $99.95 plan. That's what he wanted to go with. So we're going to say Comcast internet 75 megabits per second. And that was 99.95. Whoops. This is going to be per month. And it's really nice to, state it right here, because you don't really want the customer to be guessing, like, wait a second, is this per year, per month, per quarter, whatever it is, right? You want it to be as clear as humanly possible so that they can just look at something and really easily know what's going on. Just going to move this around a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's a quantity of 1. Okay, so this is going to be Comcast. Oh, email, I forgot to say Office 365. Okay, so we've got the domain registrar, which is where we registered it, which is GoDaddy, the domain hosting and web building, which is $10 a month, the website build itself, the phone system, which was, let's see, Ring Central. Okay, and then we've got, so I'm going to just highlight some of this stuff in a different color, even though it's fairly obvious that we're done. It's just kind of easier for me to keep track of. So when I'm done with something, I'm going to just make it this color. So I'm going to, and you can also use this format painter, which is nice. So once you have one that you've got in the right color, you can click on it, click format painter, and then just paste it instead of having to manually go change the color. Also, if you click on it and you double click Format Painter, then you can highlight multiple things without having to go back. So I'm done with this, I'm done with this, I'm done with this, I'm done with this. So go back to the pointer tool, undo the Format Painter. Okay, so now what we need to do is look at our printing solution. So if you recall, Bill didn't really want to buy a new printer. He wanted to just put in the card into the HP LaserJet printer. So if we look at our notes, we had a HP LaserJet 4100. So I'm going to copy that, paste, and do network card. And of course, Google will find almost anything. So you can find, so there's these Jet Direct cards that can basically make this printer into a network capable printer. And you want to basically procure it from a site that doesn't, look kind of weird, like, Newegg, or, well, Newegg is actually okay, but like the Printer Pros, I mean, you want something that has higher ratings, or eBay is more like individuals. There are some companies out there. I would say, Newegg Business is probably fine. Amazon is fine too. Now again, this is an unusual circumstance where you're just finding everything. In a larger company, if you do procurement, you're going to have certain vendors you go through. So you're going to basically send an email to a vendor that says, hey, I'm looking for an HP Jet Direct card, and they're going to give you a price, and then you're going to give that price to the customer. And those are usually called resellers. So you're generally going to go to a reseller. Here, we're doing more like a consumer thing where we're just going to go find the pricing and give it to our customer. So not necessarily, what you would do in a larger company, but it works. So here we're saying it's $22.99 for an HP Jet Direct. So I'm just going to copy this right here. Again, if you want to do if you just do paste, that sucks because it puts the formatting in from the website and makes the whole document look stupid. So we're going to undo that. Instead, we're going to right click. I'm going to go to here. We're going to do keep text only. So that maintains the same font as what you had for HP LaserJet 4100. So that's one of those, and that was $22.99. Okay, so at this point we have also figured out the printing, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say Jet Direct Card, and that was $22.99. Whoops. Okay, and I realized we did the internet, but we didn't really do the Wi-Fi. So part of what I didn't really go over is when you order the Comcast internet, it's going to come with a device that is going to be kind of a Wi-Fi device and a router in one, because it's a business Comcast connection. So I don't love that solution because I think that the wireless that is on that Comcast device is usually not the greatest. But the reason I'm not going to add a separate wireless device, a more business grade one, is because it's only 1,000 square feet. So it's actually a very small office. So because of that, I'm going to save Bill some money. I'm going to go with just using the same Comcast internet slash router, I'm going to say. So that is just because it's such a small office. I don't need to investigate any better wireless solutions. Now, if it was a larger office, like a 3,000 square foot or 2-floor type of office, I would have definitely bought a higher grade wireless than what's built into the Comcast modem or Comcast router. But I just want to explain that we didn't just forget about the Wi-Fi issue. He's going to have his own Wi-Fi at this point, his own internet. So he's not going to have the same issues as a shared Wi-Fi like he was originally going to do. So that was just something I forgot to mention. So now we need to look at, I don't know why this is in here twice. I'm going to get rid of that. So now we need to look at software costs, so QuickBooks, ADP, and Lacert, but we also need to figure out the desktops and laptops. So let's come back to this at the end. So we're going to, at this point, price out our desktops and laptops. So generally you're going to have a larger manufacturer that you're going to go get your laptop and desktop from. People generally don't build their own laptops and desktops anymore. They used to back in the day, but nowadays the parts are just so cheap that it just doesn't make any sense to try and build them yourself. You might as well just buy them pre-built. So, and also when you go with a larger company like Dell or HP, those are the two biggest ones that most companies are going to use. You have their warranty that comes with it, and it's just more reliable that way. And it's, for the company, it's a better liability protection. So I'm just going to go to Dell.com, and we're going to go to products, and let's start with the laptops to begin with. So we're going to do a laptop for, we'll start with work and see where we go from here. So there's a lot of really interesting things you'll see with like the Dell site or the HP site. As you click through some of these options, you'll see that the prices kind of do change, and there'll be a lot of different pricing if you pick home or work. And we'll go into some of those things. So that is very relevant to help desk and desktop support, is to kind of understand some of these hardware differences and some of the prices, because you will have to actually order laptops or desktops when they break, and you'll have to procure them from Dell or HP, just like we're doing here. The only difference is the company generally has like a direct contact with an account manager at Dell or HP that you can just directly communicate with. You don't have to necessarily go to the actual Dell website like we're doing here, but this is just to kind of learn the process. With Bill, we didn't go into these details as far as, what screen size he wanted and the processor and all that. Bill wasn't really the type of dude that wanted to get into all the nerdy details about the laptop or desktop. He just wants us to get the requirements that he wanted and basically pick the right one, right? So we went into all the details with him as far as what these three employees were doing for their job, and we knew that they were doing accounting type jobs. They weren't doing heavily graphically intensive applications, or they're basically just doing very simple stuff like using Office, using the accounting software, using internet. So we don't need to get some crazy, bleeding edge or cutting edge type of laptop or desktop. So we're just going to go with something fairly basic for him, because you don't want to gouge the customer, right? You'd rather give them something that meets their needs, but you don't need to overbuild it either. So just using logic, I mean, nowadays you might as well go with a 15-inch because they're not that much more expensive. Now, when it comes to an i5 or an i7, those are the most common things you'll see in business. If you've ever wanted to know in practicality if it's worthwhile to go with an i5 versus an i7, there will be a significant price difference. So just to compare, I'm going to pick an i5 here, and you'll see some of the costs, right? So an i5, a 7th generation, which is one of the newer i5s, with 8 gigs of RAM, which, by the way, DDR4 is really nice RAM. It's one of the fastest RAMs you can get. There's all DDR1 all the way to DDR4, and basically the higher the number, the faster the RAM. That's really all that matters right now. So you can see, I mean, it's pretty cheap. You can get one for $499. That is a pretty decent device, right? But if we go to, or $599 with a solid state drive, which is pretty good. But if you go with an i7, so you can see the price goes up quite a bit. So what is that? About at least $150, right? So now the RAM stayed the same, the operating system stayed the same. Now you've got a 7th generation i7 instead of an i5. So you're basically paying just for that variable alone, you're paying $150 or $200 more. So you really got to weigh out if that's important to the customer as far as, are they going to benefit from an i7? But also you have to look at the whole life cycle of what they're buying and how long they want to use it for. So you don't want to necessarily buy an older type of spec or specification of hardware and find that the customer is wanting to upgrade in a year or two, and they're going to wonder why you didn't buy something higher end for slightly more money, because now they might have to spend a whole lot of money on new laptops. So you don't want to put them in a place where they're going to be behind, but you also don't want to overbuild it. So just for our own knowledge, this is the power of being able to Google stuff, right? So you can do something like i5 versus i7 comparison. So let's see what this site says. PC Magazine is a good site, by the way. So if we look at some of the basics of what they're talking about, right? So as you might have guessed, the i7s have, well, what do you know? Shocker, more capabilities than the i5s. They're better for multitasking, high-end gaming. Scientific work is really not applicable for like your average day person. This is more for like, places like Boston Scientific or something like that, where they're going to be doing actual like computations, not just Excel documents and basic things like that. So, if you're doing multimedia or gaming or a lot of multitasking just means like you have a ton of different windows open and you're doing a bunch of different work, right? So you'll see that, well, this is saying it's $70 less, but on our site we saw it was close to $100 and some dollars less to go with an i5 versus an i7. So it really depends on if you feel like the customer is going to be doing a bunch of multitasking There's other reasons to go with the i5, oh sorry, the i7, which I think this article will explain. Hyperthreading is another one. So hyperthreading just means it's having multiple tasks being worked on by the CPU at the same time. So the CPU, think of it as the brain. So the i7s automatically use hyperthreading. So it can basically use all of the CPU's cores, which are basically, think of it as like the physical CPU is broken up into 8 little logical CPUs, and it can do 2 streams each. So it can do 16 streams at that point, for example. So an i7, if you are doing a lot of multitasking with having like 50 different browser windows open and 10 different applications and all this stuff, it could actually outperform an i5 by quite a bit. So it really just depends on what the customer is doing. I'm kind of torn here. I feel like Bill is just not doing a whole lot because his tax business is very simple. So you easily could have gotten away with an i5, I'm pretty sure, and saved him some money. But what we could do is just explain to Bill that we're going to go with the i7 because he's going to be future-proof that way. And then, if he wants to really save money and go with a more cost-effective laptop, then we can always switch back to the i5s. So notice that you also have 8 gigs of RAM across the board here, but also the hard drive types, right? So you've got a 1 terabyte 5400 RPM hard drive. So the RPM, this is the traditional SATA type drives, and then you have the solid state drives. So a simple version is, think of a SATA drive as a drive that has kind of think of a record player which has an arm, right, that needs to move around and read the record. So a traditional drive has this arm that has to go and like circulate and read the data from the hard drive. So there's like moving parts, versus a solid state drive is basically a big chunk of memory. And memory is much faster than moving parts because your data is being written to in a much faster way. So even though this seems like a really good deal because 1 terabyte is much bigger than 512, it's double the size of 512 gigs, but the 512 gigs solid state drive will easily outperform these drives. So everything else is the same, right? Same CPU, same operating system, same RAM, but you might think like, well, why in the world are you going to pay $100 more when this is actually a smaller hard drive? And that's because this is a much, much faster, better technology. Solid state drives you're going to see much faster performance from this than this, even though you have an extra, 500 gigs of space here. So I'm not convinced that I want to just go with any one of these just yet. So I can also go back here and go back to laptops, but this time I'm gonna actually pick for home just for giggles to see what we get. So I'm gonna go pick the same 15 to 16 inch. I'm gonna pick, just to compare apples for apples, I'm gonna pick an i7. I'm gonna see what we get. So here we're actually getting some higher end systems here, like 16 gigs, which we don't need. Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that these home systems are actually more than the business systems. That's actually not what I was expecting. Oh, you know why? It's because they're touch displays. So that's a whole, yeah, these are going to be more expensive because touchscreen is always going to be more than regular. So I'm going to just say non-touchscreen displays. What the? That was weird. So it actually went up in price. Is this actually for home? Yeah, it is. Okay. Let me go back to here. I feel like I picked the wrong category. So I'm going to go back to products, laptops, view all laptops. And I'm just going to pick this. Okay, see, there we go. I was wondering what the heck was going on. So I must accidentally click some weird setting up here. So if you only pick the size, then you can see everything, right? So you're seeing these are Celeron processors, so you can get really cheap. I mean, you can be $279 for 4 gigs, but remember this is DDR3, not DDR4. It's only 4 gigs of RAM. You're talking a different type of processor. So now let's pick the i7. So we only picked the size in the i7, so now let's see what it gets to. So here we can see we have some options for apples. So we have an i7 with 8 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte hard drive, but this is not the solid state drive. This is a SATA drive. So these aren't really that great as far as options, because these are actually not that much cheaper than the business systems. And the business systems actually had Windows 10 Professional on it. This is Windows 10 Home. And if you look at Windows 10 Home versus Pro, there are some significant differences between the two. So I'm just going to scroll. You can read this article on your own. It's some good stuff. But for efficiency of time, I'm just going to scroll down to here. So you can see that a lot of the things are the same. So yes. But now here's some major stuff, right? So if you're going to be using a laptop for business, and that laptop needs to be joined to a corporate domain, which we'll be going into some of this stuff later in the curriculum, but it's really, really important for most even mid-sized companies to have a domain, because you can control the policy of everything that laptop or desktop is doing, down to how often the passwords need to be changed, to what software can be installed on it, what rights the user has to delete files, or all kinds of things can be controlled through these two things right here: joining the domain and group policy, this and this. So those two things are going to be really important for any mid to large size corporation. Now, Bill is just a small tax shop, so I mean, yeah, will he ever have a true domain? I mean, he's going to have a domain in that it's going to be called billstaxhaven.com, but there's a difference between that and having an internal domain as far as how the users' laptops or desktops are joined to it and controlling policy. So group policy may not be important for Bill, especially not right now with just 4 people. If he was to grow to a much bigger company, that might be important. BitLocker is maybe not important. It has to do with encrypting your file system so that you can secure your data. So you can't do that with Windows 10 Home either. Another really weird thing is remote desktop. So if you don't actually have Windows 10 Professional, you can't remote into that desktop. Remoting into meaning like remotely controlling it using the built-in remote desktop function of Windows. So there's just some things to think about. So if you were pricing something out, sometimes you might see that this price might look the same. You might be like, wait, this particular laptop is $100 cheaper than on the other site. Well, that might be because Windows 10 Home is also cheaper than Windows 10 Pro. So maybe the other site that you're comparing it to was talking about Windows 10 Professional, which has a bunch more features, right? And so you can't really compare Windows 10 Home and Pro. You have to make sure you're comparing apples for apples. So, after looking through some of this stuff, I'm thinking that the business laptops are better, and they were already running Windows 10 Pro, but the price wasn't really that much higher to go on the business side. So we might as well have Bill be future-proofed, so he can run Windows 10 Pro, and he never has to upgrade at that point. So I'm going to go back to all laptops. And I'm going to pick products for work. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to go back and pick my screen size. Whoops. So you can see the price goes way down if you pick any processor. The moment you pick an i7, the price goes way up. That's because that processor is actually a much better processor, right? So we have kind of our sweet spot here, in that we've got the same type of RAM. It's 8 gigs of RAM no matter what. This one actually has 12, which is probably overkill. Although interestingly, all of the solid state drives went away, which is odd. I thought there was one that had a solid state drive on it. So we might have to actually pick that. So if we pick solid state drive, the price is probably going to go way up. Of course it did. Well, here's one. So here is this solid state 512 gig one, which isn't bad. That should be plenty. No one really should have more than this, as long as they don't have a bunch of movies or music, like excessive amounts of movies or music or things like that. But really, if this is for business use, Bill's employees should be storing all of their home movies or DVDs or that they're encoding onto their computer or whatever they're doing. There's really no good reason why you would have over this. So you should be good. So I think this is a really good value now that we've price shopped some of this stuff, because for just about $100 more, you're getting Windows 10 Professional and you're getting a solid state drive, which is going to be way faster than your much larger 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte SATA drives, because those again have moving parts think of that record player where the hand of the record player has to move around and write data, versus a solid state drive is just basically a big RAM drive, and it's much faster. So I'm just gonna copy this right here, and I'm gonna put that into our quote, because that's what we're gonna get. So I'm gonna say not HP, Dell. And again, I'm gonna right click and do this so that it doesn't screw up my whole formatting, because again, if I just came in here and I just did right click paste, it's going to put this weird formatting in here, and it's going to look totally different than the rest of this document. It's going to look unprofessional. So I'm going to instead right click and just do text only, and I'm going to put some of the specs in here. So I'm going to say i7, I'm going to say 512 gigabit solid state drive. I'm going to say 8 gigabytes RAM. Let's see, what else do we have? 8 gigs of RAM, 512, i7, Windows 10 Pro. Yeah, that should be good. And that would be a quantity of 4. And $749.99. So if we do $749.99 times 4, $299.96. Okay. So that might be expensive. I don't know. I guess Bill might come back and not want to sign this because he might want cheaper laptops. But we have that possibility, right? Because simply by just coming in here and just changing this to an i5, I'm sure it'll go down. Yes, I mean, we could still have a solid state drive and be at about $600 a piece instead of $749. So I mean that would add up. I mean, $150 cheaper times 4, so you're going to save $600 just from that. And if we wanted to even save more money, we could say, well, fine, if you don't want a solid state drive, I can give you a SATA drive, which will be, you know, a 1 terabyte drive, and you can get all the way down to 500 per laptop. So that would save you $250 a laptop, which would save you $1,000. So I mean, you can get really, really cheap if you want to, and you could even get really crazy and say, I want even a smaller size screen, maybe, and then go to here and see. Well, actually, that's kind of funny. It didn't really go down at all in price. So yeah, the screen size may not be the biggest factor, but the processor will definitely make a big difference, and the hard drive. So just the fact that we went with an i5 instead of an i7, the fact that we're going with the SATA hard drive instead of the solid state drive can affect your price quite a bit. So it's just, you know, things to keep in mind. We're trying to pick something that is hopefully within the budget, but also kind of future-proofed. Some people would counteract that or argue against that by saying that the price of hardware is always going down, so why not just wait? And that's a fair argument. It's just, you know, if you're picking a solution for a customer, you don't want to pick something that only works for, let's say, a year or two. You want something that'll work for at least, you know, 4 years, I'd say 4 to 5 years, because that's a typical cycle, you know, or replacement cycle for business devices in general, whether it's laptops or desktops. I prefer to try and go for a 5 to 7 type of cycle, because it really just depends on how much more you're going to pay for being future proofed. Because you could say that you're saving you know, $100 per laptop, and that's not something to sneeze about. It's a real cost. But how much does it cost you to you know, replace them a year later? Because now you have all this data on them, you have to back it up, you have to, you know, pay someone to come in and restore them onto a new laptop, rebuild the laptop. You know, you take something as simple as a hourly fee of $100 an hour for someone, all they have to do is spend 1 hour rebuilding things in the future and moving data onto that newer hard drive because you were cheap and you got the cheapest thing you could afford right now. Well, you just spent way more money than that, you know, in the long run. So if you can have something that is fairly future-proof for 5 to 7 years by buying, you know, something that's middle of the road instead of super cheap, you're probably going to actually save the company or save the customer more money in the long run. So it's just good to know, to be able to explain some of that stuff. So we've got that figured out. So at that point, we've got our laptops figured out. So we're going to say those were Dell i7 laptops. And that was $749.99. Okay. And I'm going to highlight that, so I'm done with it. So now we need to pick our desktops. So I'm going to go back up to here, products, laptops, view all that. Whoops, why did I do that? I meant to do desktops. Okay. So desktops, again, you can pick the processor to start off with. So I'm going to say, you know, i7. So you can see that there's, a bunch of different ways you could do this. There are these different small form factor types of desktops, which is one way of doing it. You could really get a tower type of style, which is a bigger device. We didn't really ask Bill this because, again, I didn't think Bill really cared, honestly. He wanted to just get something that worked and wanted us to really kind of make the decision. So we asked him enough, I felt like, to get the requirements, and really it's up to us to figure out what makes sense for him. So as far as desktops, I don't know why this is being so weird. Here we go. Where is the desktops? I'm trying to look for the business desktops. There we go. Tower workstations. So I'm going to pick an i7. So you can see the towers are a little bit more expensive than the small form factor. And they also are a lot more powerful. So the reason I'm going with a tower for the one that he's going to run QuickBooks on is because I want this to be really future-proofed. I've seen people try to cut corners on their desktop. That's really, because really it's more like a server in that he's running a really important application on it, which is what everyone's going to use. So most people nowadays are trying to get away from actually running local applications that are critical for a small business. They want to run everything in the cloud because then you just have an internet connection and the cloud provider, whether it's Microsoft or Google or Amazon or whoever, Amazon Web Services or whoever is hosting it, they need to worry about the server that it's running on. You're not having to worry about it. Well, because of this QuickBooks desktop software that he's running, it has to actually run locally on his desktop. So now we do have to actually make sure we do a good job with picking the right type of desktop. So originally, when he called up for the PC build, he said his budget was about $1,500. So I'm going to kind of work with that, and I want to have, if I can, a solid state drive instead of a SATA drive. Now notice these are higher RPM drives. The SATA drive that we looked at on the laptop said 5,400 RPM. This is 7,200 RPM. So literally it's like repetitions per minute. That's almost like literally how fast can the hard drive reader spin. So the faster RPMs, the faster the drive can write. It's got a lot of RAM, so 16 gigs of RAM is pretty good. I just want to see if there's something that has a solid state drive. I'm just kind of surprised that it doesn't. Okay, this one is really expensive, so I'm gonna pick. Yeah, that's because it's an all-in-one. So all-in-ones are, things where it's the monitor and the desktop in one device, which it's always way more expensive because you're paying for convenience at that point. So I want to just get to a different section here. Desktops. Okay, so we want probably the Optiplex line for business. Okay, so now if we pick that and we go with the i7, Okay, so now hopefully I can pick a solid state drive. There we go. So you can see, like, you know, sometimes you have to mess around with the site to navigate to where your sweet spot is because, you know, I mean, Dell doesn't know if you're looking for an all-in-one device or if you're looking for one of those small form factor ones, or if you're looking for more of a mini tower, kind of like what we have right here. Okay, so we've got a decent option here as far as it's an i7 with 8 gigs of RAM. You've got 2 different hard drives, so this is another interesting configuration where you've got 128 gig solid state drive and a 1 terabyte regular SATA drive, and that actually isn't bad because you can at that point install your operating system, which is Windows 7, onto this. I can't believe I said Windows 7, Windows 10, sorry. You will run your Windows 10 Pro on here, on this drive, and then you could store just files, for example, like if you back up the QuickBooks database or just back up your files in general for all the users in the office, you could throw it on this one because those are just for storage. You're not actively using those files all the time. So when people are using QuickBooks, they would be running off of this really fast drive. So that's one way you can do it. So I'm gonna, yeah, I'll stick with that. And I do want to increase the RAM. I think we'd like to have 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, so we're still technically under budget because he said $1,500. So this seems to be our best bet here, where that's actually pretty cheap. So just for a shade over 1,000, you're getting i7, you're getting Windows 10 Pro, you're getting 16 gigs of RAM, and again, it's DDR4 RAM, which is the fastest RAM, and you're getting a solid state drive. So I think that should be pretty good. I do like to throw in a CD-ROM. I know it sounds kind of old-fashioned, but on a desktop that could be used for installing software, there's especially like older software, sometimes it comes in a CD format. And yes, you can convert the CD to an ISO and install it from a USB drive or whatever, but it never hurts to throw it in. It usually doesn't increase the price much either. It actually didn't increase the price at all. Let's see, I think we're pretty good here. So we could just go with this model right here. So I'm just going to just copy this. Again, I'm going to make sure I right click and paste just the text. I'm going to say desktop. What was the model number? Oh, so you notice that if you picked Windows 10 Home, it's $50 less. So that's what I was trying to say before. It's like, usually it's a little bit cheaper to go with the Home Edition, but we want the Pro because in case he wants a domain or BitLocker or some of these other things in the future. So that's a really weird model number to say new Inspiron desktop, but I guess that's just what it's called. So I'm going to paste that, but also just text. And I'm going to put in the same specs here. I'm going to just copy this. And I'm going to update that this is a 16 gigs of RAM. So this is 1 terabyte plus 128. So I'm going to write that down. 1/1 TB. So that should be fairly obvious to anyone looking at this that it's a 2-drive system at that point. Okay, so that's one of those. And that was 1049. Okay. So we've got Dell i7 desktop. Okay, so I'm done with that. Okay, so now the only thing that remains is QuickBooks, ADP, and Lacert. So you can see that, I mean, this takes some time because you're boiling down all these conversations and discovery meetings and all this stuff into one sheet that has all of that captured to show the customer this is all of your costs, right? So it's a lot of different things that just got boiled down into a very simple document right now. So let's look up QuickBooks Pro cost. Let's see, so we have Pro 2018, you have Pro Plus, which has all the perks of Pro. It has the automated data backup built into it, which we wanted. It's got the upgrades built in. So that's $200 a year. So by the way, like this is another thing. So everyone will talk about how the cloud version is better. And it is because it's easier to manage in a way, but it's also, you know, way more expensive in a way because like this is a one-time cost, right? So like for example, if you just went the regular Pro, it's only $219 versus if you go with the QuickBooks Online, you're going to pay a monthly fee forever. So even if that monthly fee is, let's say, $50 a month, I mean, you're still going to pay $600 in a year. So you're going to pay 3 times what your one-time payment is here. The difference is that here now you're responsible for maintaining whatever desktop or server the software is on. So it's just, you know, out of companies fearing the IT support or whatever, that they'll go with the online version, and also the online version is easier to access from anywhere because you can just access it from your phone or whatnot anywhere with internet. But also, you know, if you set it up right, you can access QuickBooks Professional at your office from anywhere through VPN, and you can actually VPN from your phone also. So in a technical sense, you can actually access everything remotely if you set it up on premises or in the cloud. It's just, you know, when you set it up on premises, it takes a little bit more effort. It takes a little bit more IT know-how, which maybe not everyone has. So you just need to be able to advise the customer. So this is essentially saying, you know, it's a one-time fee of this much, which has the base software, but then instead of a one-time fee, if you spend $200 a year, you get a bunch of support. So that is actually kind of a factor. You get 24/7 support and the automated backups. One could say that I'd rather spend the $200 one time and never have to pay again, or you can spend the $200 every year and gain backups and support. I would say it's actually worth it to do the backup and support. Now, this is kind of a game changer, but he could have also gone with Pro Plus, which is kind of a hybrid where instead of using the online edition, you're basically taking the pro software and you're putting it on their hosting platform, right? So it's going to be a lot more expensive. You're probably going to spend 100 to 200 a month, and they don't give you the actual cost because you have to actually call this number to get the cost. So it's going to be, I don't know, what was it? Somewhere between $100 and $200 a month based on the last website we looked at last time. So let's say, $1,500 a year. So in a couple of years, you're going to spend $3,000. In 3 years, you're going to spend $4,500. But at that point, you wouldn't have to have the desktop, right, that we're going to purchase. But it all just comes down to, do you want to spend money on a desktop? What do we spend? $1,000 roughly? Yeah, so we spend $1,000 on this really powerful desktop. That'll be plenty for supporting that software. So do you want to spend this and then not have to spend, a bunch per month in addition to this, right? Or do you want to just forget about all of it and just say, you know what, I'm just going to spend $150 a month and just not have to deal with anything? So it's whatever you're paying for convenience and know-how is really what it comes down to. So for Bill, I would say, if he doesn't need support for because this is actually support for like the accounting software itself, it's probably fine for him not to get the support. But then at the same time, the data backup is really nice, where it's an automated function and it's going to be stored in OneDrive, so that way it's always there. So even though Bill may not love it, I kind of like getting the support and the automated backup. So I think I'm going to recommend this. So it's $199 per year. Yep, $199.95. Okay, so that covers that. And then ADP software, which is the payroll software. So this one is just talking about Intuit payroll versus ADP, which it's a comparison, but as long as they have the number of what we're going to be spending per month, then that's fine. Okay, so let's see. It starts at $25 per month to manage paying employees, contractors, and rises to $39 per month to support federal and state. Okay, so that's that. Okay. 106 per month. Okay. So they're saying it's about 106 per month with the time tracking. So they're basically saying Intuit payroll is cheaper, but the customer already has said that they want to do ADP. So we're just gonna put whatever requirement they want. So there must be certain features of ADP that they liked. And so here, I mean, the customer could have easily signed up for this payroll service themselves, but if they want to delegate that to us as a professional services company, then we can do that. Because there is going to be hours also that I'm going to estimate on here. So I'm just going to list all of the hard costs of the different software and services that hardware and software and services that we need as a separate function, and then I'm going to list my billable hours as a separate line item. So I'm gonna say, actually that is for 4 people, and I'm gonna say it was $61. No, actually it was 106. So I mean that's kind of expensive actually, but I think that's just kind of the way it is. Some payroll services are more expensive than others, and it's because of different features. I'm sure ADP supports more complex payroll combinations of different types of paying structures or reimbursements, things like that. So wow, so that's actually kind of expensive. So that's $424 a month for the 4. So it depends. If you have a lot of people, I mean, you could probably negotiate that down or whatnot, but this is just more of an estimate of what it's going to cost, or if he even wants us to do it. And lastly was Lacert. So Lacert tax software costs. Let's take a look here. Okay, so basically for unlimited individual packages, it's around 5,000. Per return is $395. Okay. So I'm gonna assume that because it's a tax service and they're gonna be doing lots of filings, they're probably not gonna want to pay $395 per filing, which means if they just did 10 of them, that would be $3,900. So I'm assuming they're gonna do a lot more than 10. So I'm gonna say unlimited. Lacert unlimited tax software, and that was 5,000. Again, you're gonna have a vendor. Most likely, you're not gonna be just researching it on the internet to find this pricing in most cases, and you're gonna send them. You're gonna just send them this list right here, for example, and they're gonna give you back the price. You won't necessarily be finding out the price like this. I mean, you may if it's a smaller company, but in a larger company, they have a separate whole department that's a procurement department or purchasing department. So just keep that in mind. And so here I'm going to put in implementation hours. So I'm going to basically go through and estimate how many hours it's going to take me to do all this work. Also, I think I forgot my UPS on here. I got the laptops, I got the desktop, I got the faxing, did I have the LaserJet? Yes, I did. I had ADP, Lacert, QuickBooks, the laptop, the Comcast, the phone system, the domain, the corporate email, I got all that. So I really just forgot the UPS, so I gotta add another line in here for that. I'm gonna put it under the desktop right here. So 1 desktop UPS. So this 1500 volt amps will be plenty for that type of desktop. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here as just text. That's 163.82. Okay, so now I'm gonna go and kind of calculate, because this is an estimate also, so remember, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, it's more of an estimate, and I'm gonna add some more time to it just to buy myself some wiggle room, just in case some of my estimates don't turn out to be exactly what I think they are. So to register, I'm just gonna, you know, add an hour there, so I'm gonna put this into a spreadsheet real quick. Excel. So I'm just going to paste that, and I'm going to expand this to be over here. If you highlight your cursor over here and you double click, it'll actually highlight the whole thing, and double click over here, it'll automatically can just consolidate all that so it's easier to read. Okay, so you need to get yours to look like that by just clicking here, which highlights everything, and then double clicking on the hash mark right here in between two of those lines. Okay, so I'm gonna put in, you know, item and hours. It's basically how long it's going to take me to do all these things, right? So I'm going to say for GoDaddy, I'm just going to allocate 2 hours for that. I'm going to allocate 40 hours for building the website. Actually, no, I'm going to say 20 hours because it's a simple website. To set up all the Office 365 emails and everything, I'm going to say 20 hours. The phone system, to order it and set it up, because it's cloud-based, it's not going to be a ton of work, but it still have to go into a web interface, set up the phones, and set up the phone numbers and voicemail. So I'm just going to say 2 hours per user, so I'm going to round up and just say 10 hours. Actually, I'm going to say 12 just to add some wiggle room. Technically, the Comcast should be just about 2 hours to order it, just to be on the phone with the support person. When they come on site, that would be another 2 hours, so I'm going to say 4 hours there. I'm going to also customize some of the security settings on it. I'm going to add the Wi-Fi name to match Bill's tax haven and secure that. So I'm going to say 10 hours to be safe. The JetDirect is going to probably take me 2 hours to install on his existing printer. To set up all the laptops, that's 4 of them. I'm going to say, to be safe, 2 hours a piece, so I'm going to say, 10 hours total. I'm going to say 4 hours for the desktop. And then the UPS, I'm just going to say an hour to set that up. To set up QuickBooks, because it's a local application, just in case I run into issues, say 4 hours ADP. I probably shouldn't have to spend much, so just an hour. List certs, again, hopefully 2 hours. And so now I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to add these all up, so I can do equals sum, parentheses, and then drag this from here to here, close parentheses. So it's 88 hours. And I'm going to save this document because I want to. So click over here to highlight everything and then do left justified. I'm going to highlight this. And notice how the font is kind of different. So I don't want to have 2 different fonts because I copied it from the other document. So I'm just going to set everything to be Calibri 11. So I'm going to highlight here and go to Calibri set 11. So notice everything's the same font now. And then I'm going to highlight this part right here and make sure I have my border set up to be like this. And then I'm going to highlight the top row and make it look a little bit nicer like that. And I'm just going to put a description, total consulting hours. So that's going to be 88. And I'm going to save this. If you go to browse. So I've got my drive here where I have my trainees, TED trainee, projects, my open projects, bills tax haven. I'm going to call this hours estimate. So I want to save that there so that if I ever want to reference back to this, I can do that. So I'm just going to plug in the 88 hours for now. Implementation hour is at $100 an hour, 88 hours. So that's 8,800. And I need to actually adjust some of this stuff because, you know, this is on a per year basis. This is on a per month basis. So this is if we were to take on kind of managing all this for Bill. So, which sometimes we do. And technically some of these he could just take on as far as having his own, you know, accounts payable. Accounts payable is just the person that pays the bills, basically. So he could have his own accounts payable person handle this type of stuff, because that way we don't have to pay his bill, his monthly bill, right? So this is also like his bill. This is also his bill. So technically, yeah, I mean, these are just his bills, right? It was important for me to know these steps so that I can, you know, add the time in that it's going to take me to set all that stuff up. But like, so there's the consulting hours, as far as how long I'm going to take to get these things up, and then there's the actual cost of them, of the items themselves, like, you know, registering for GoDaddy. I'm not going to be paying that, you know, every year for him. I'm not going to be paying this per month for him. I'm not going to be paying this per month for him, because, you know, his Office 365 payment is really up to him. Same thing for the phone system. I'm not going to be paying his phone system bill or his Comcast internet bill for him. So I'm going to just save this as a different document so that I can oh, you know what, actually I already have this over here. Oh, you know, but it doesn't have the actual cost. So yeah, I'm going to save this as instead of a quote, I'm just going to call it bills tax service monthly costs. And I'm going to send that to Bill just as a separate document altogether. And this is a really important thing to do, is like, you know, instead of like removing this and having to add it back again on a different doc, just save as, right? And then you can just send it to him as a separate document. And you might format it slightly differently before you send it to him. So I'm going to close out of all my documents. I'm going to close out of my browser too, because we're done with all that. I'm going to save this also. You want to really just get used to saving a lot of your documents in one place so that it's consistent. So I'm going to go back to my network drive. I'm going to go under trainees, TED trainee, projects, open project, bills tax haven. I'm going to call this raw requirements. And raw data, raw requirements are basically like a very rudimentary set of notes or requirements that you took. So obviously I'm never going to send this to Bill because it doesn't look very good, but for me it actually worked as I was on the call or when I was looking through the emails. I was able to kind of just put everything down in a simple format like this, and then I can take this and make it look much better and more formal. So we got this figured out too, by the way, which we'll have to update in a second here. So I close out of this. So now if I go to my network drive, I have my hours estimate that I saved that shows how long it took me to do all these things. I've got my raw requirements, which is just for me, which is just quick, simple notes. I've got my monthly costs here that has everything in here. I mean, it had my actual consulting related stuff as far as like, you know, these are the parts that he needs to buy. These are the desktop and server and UPS, and this is the software he needs to buy that I can procure for him. So this part is actually fine because I can actually handle this stuff, right? These are more bills. So on bills, monthly costs, I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of all the parts, right? So the Jet Direct, the desktops, or sorry, the laptops, the desktop, the UPS, the QuickBooks, the ADP software, whatever, and actually the implementation hours too. I'm just going to get rid of that. And so if you just hit backspace, you can just hit shift cells left. Actually, I'm going to show you this again. So when you've got a document or table, sorry, in Microsoft Word, it's a little bit different than a table in Excel. So you highlight all of the cells that you want to get rid of, and if you just hit backspace, or you can hit right click and delete, whichever works. So if you delete cells, you can just hit shift cells left, that's fine, and you can see that it's going to automatically get rid of those, right? So now this is all of his monthly bills, right? So, well, this is per year. So what you could do is actually take and convert, so I can say monthly price, and call this yearly price, or annual price. Actually, for bills, you're going to call it cost, not really price. I mean, it's the same thing, but generally for bills, you're going to call it a cost instead of a price. For something that you pay, like a purchase, you might call it a price instead of a cost. It's pretty much one of the same. So this is monthly, it's $19.98, annual, sorry, I'm going to say monthly. I'm going to say NA because it's just a one-time, it's a yearly cost. So if this is $10 per month, it's going to be $120 per year. Same thing. So this is going to be $12.50 per person, right? So it's 4 people. So really, our cost is going to be $50 on a monthly basis, but for the whole year it's going to be $600. Well, actually I shouldn't be doing mental math, I should be calculating it. So instead I'm going to say 50 times 12 is 600. So does that make sense? So it's $12.50 per person, but there's 4 people, so that's 50, and then there's 12 months in a year, so 600. And then same thing, so it's $79.96 per month. But then for a year, if you take $79.96 times 12, $959.52. Okay. And then you got 99, 95 times 12, 1199.40. So this is your monthly amount, that's your annual amount. So it depends on whichever one he wants to look at. So I'm just gonna just say, I'm gonna change this from a quote so he doesn't get confused. I'm just gonna say monthly bills estimate. So it's not really an invoice. I'm gonna get rid of this. There's really no expiration on this. It's not a invoice because it's just a summary of bills. I'm just gonna actually say monthly bills. Yeah, actually that's fine, estimate. Okay. So I don't really need to even have this as far as acceptance of this because this is just, you know what, that's fine. I'm gonna say, he can accept this also. I'm gonna say estimate prepared by, and I can sign this and send it to him. It's fine. It's just a way to have him know what his bills are gonna be. So I can even add this for him. So if I actually take this and go back to Excel, paste that. Not really sure what's taking so long, but okay, so if we go back to here, we can equal some parentheses that. So 2898.9. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put it under the total. Right click, remember, and text only. So I'm going to put the $sign on here. Put a little comma there to separate. So that's going to be his yearly costs for all of this stuff to support hosting, to support email, to support Office 365 and storage, the phone system, and internet and Wi-Fi. So that's going to be a pretty useful thing for Bill as he starts to understand what it's like to go from a one-person office to a business with 4 people. So I got that figured out. I'm going to close out of this. So that's just the monthly bill. So now if we go back to the actual service quote, oh, you know what? I committed the cardinal sin there, where I went and saved as, but actually I got rid of the extra items on there. So I saved it as monthly cost, but I never actually saved when I had just the service quote. So if you look here, this one's completely empty. But that's okay because I have all this in my hours estimate, so it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to go ahead and update this later. You saw what that will look like, so I'm going to come back in a second when we're done with this, but essentially this is the process for creating a sales quote. It's not that important really to have this be 100% accurate. It's just I made a mistake where I should have actually saved this first, and then I should have done save to make sure that this was updated, and then I should have done save as, gone to this folder and actually saved it as the monthly cost. So that was a mistake that I made, but it's not a big deal. I'm just going to send Bill this monthly costs thing, and I'm going to add the hours estimate into it, which is not a big deal. I'll just send that out. We don't need to watch me do this because you get the point. So at this point, I've got my quote actually done. So I've basically got what Bill needs to sign off. So I'm going to go ahead, and at this point I'm going to print it. I'm going to sign off on it and send it off to Bill, and then Bill can, if he agrees, can then come back and have me move forward with the project. So I'm going to quickly update this document here. Because we have the cost from what we did before in the Visio. So I'm just going to go ahead like that. And it's actually just a learning opportunity on how to fix a mistake that you made, right? So I'm going to go into here. So I'm going to add these items back in. I'm going to, okay, so I'm going to save as actually. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to overwrite this one, the service quote. Save that. It's going to say, do you want to replace the existing file? Yes. Okay, so now just for sanity's sake, I'm going to show you I've got two documents in here. One is the monthly service costs, which is what we looked at before. And now this other one, which is the actual full service quote. And that one's the same thing right now, right? So I'm just going to call this the service quote again, which is fine. And you have a date, right? And then you have a expiration. If you remember, we had that on there. And generally, this is going to be, like we said, about 3 weeks or so, or 2 weeks, depending, for him to decide. So this is a service quote, and I'm going to say quote prepared by. Okay. So not a big deal. So we've got our monthly and annual fees in here. So we're going to just retrofit this by adding some lines into here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to add 7 lines in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's add one more extra one. Okay, and then I'm going to copy and paste this into here to get this back to where it should be in the first place. Whoops. I'm going to right click and do text. Okay, so I'm going to have to actually move these manually, not a big deal. So you can just Control X and Control V. Not a big deal. Sometimes mistakes are made. I should have saved it better than that. But, you know, it just goes to show that even if I've done this a million times, you still make mistakes every now and then. So I'm going to quick fix this. But you can see it only took a few minutes to fix it. It's not the end of the world. I'm just doing Control X, Control V for all these parts right here. Okay, So the HP Jet Direct card, if I look in here, was $22.99. If you look at the Dell, which was the laptops, it was $749.99, and there were 4 of those. And also keep in mind, we're not going to have these on here because these lines were related to the bills, right? So we've got the bills on one document, and we've got the actual hardware and software costs on the other one. So I'm going to get rid of that. Again, you can right click and hit delete, for example. Okay. So I'm going to save this just for sanity's sake. So if you go back out, and you go back to your folder, you've got your monthly costs now. That's just your bills. And then you've got your service quote, which has all your hardware and software, right? So a little bit of a boo-boo, but not a big deal. So I'm going to, so this is basically unit cost here. And this is total cost. So it's just one of those. So now you got to do the whole 749. Whoops. 749.99 times 4. 2,999.96. Is that right? 2,999.96, yep. And this was one of those. And the Dell was 1,049. So 1,049. Actually, I didn't have the UPS on this final document here. I actually should do that. So I'm going to say UPS. That was a trip light. Yeah, I closed out my window, so I'm going to have to quick look that one up again. So that was this one right here, so 187.99. So let's update that. Actually, I've got the description here, so I'm just going to Google that. Just to make sure it's the same one. There it is, 163.82. Okay. So it's one of those, one of these, one of these. Okay, so I've got my printer card, I've got my 4 laptops, I've got the 1 desktop, I've got the 1 UPS, and was 163.82. So it's 163.82. Okay. And then I need to add my QuickBooks in here. Which I didn't write down. I closed my browser out, which, you know, one could argue that you should leave it up until you're 100% ready. So QuickBooks row cost. So that was we decided to go with the $199 per year model. So $199.99. ADP. So it was 106 per month per employee. 106. And actually that was 4 employees, so if you look at 106 times 4, 424 per month. You know, actually the payroll is a bill also, so we're gonna take that out and add it to the other document. So I'm gonna get rid of that. So let's look at the lessert. Yeah, I believe that one was the 5,000. Yeah, that was the 5,000, yeah. Okay, so before we forget, let's go ahead and add that ADP cost to the monthly cost here. Oh, it's hanging like this. So let's just go ahead and open up this, right click and do open. Okay, so monthly estimates, so we need to add one more line. So actually it's 4 because it's 4 people. ADP payroll cost. So it's 106. 106 times 4 is 424 actually per month. And that times 12, 5,088 per month. Or per year, sorry. So if I was to add, because 5,088 plus 2,898.9 is what was already here, will get me 7,986. 7,986. I'm going to copy that and paste over here. That is my total costs for all my bills per year. So that is now accurate. So it's actually kind of difficult to sometimes figure out, okay, which things are monthly bills, which things are yearly bills, converting the monthly to the yearly, and then separating that from your software costs and hardware costs, right? So we've got that now. So I can close out of that. I'm back over here now. So I've got my parts now identified, all of my hardware and software. So that's good. And now I just need to basically add my professional services time, which is 88 hours. So quantity 88. So I'm going to say hourly consulting. Unit cost is 100. So that would be 8,800. So I'm going to have to add all this up. So I'm going to go ahead and take that into a spreadsheet. Just temporarily paste it in here. And do equals sum. Add that up. So that's going to be the total bill. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. Okay, so let's just double check everything. So I've got my HP Jet Direct, I've got my 4 laptops, 749 times 4. I've got my desktop, I've got my UPS, I've got my QuickBooks, I've got the Lacert software, and then hourly consulting, which is really, this is where the company makes their money, right? This is like basically just procuring everything for the customer and figuring out what they want, but really all of the hours it took us to do this, including doing all the work, this is where we get to bill the customer for the hourly rate, and that's where we really make our money as a company. So I'm going to save this time, and I'm going to close out of it, and I'm not going to save this change because I don't want to save the part I just added here, so I'm just going to close out of that and say don't save. So now I should have a completely different document that's got my monthly costs right here, and I've got my actual service costs right here, which is my estimate of all the hardware and software, and also my billable hours in here. So that was super long, and it was kind of a long process, but it showed you how to go from raw requirements of a phone call and a WebEx and all that kind of stuff to finally putting it together in a final format, in a way that you can actually send it as a quote to the customer. And we went the extra mile of actually separating the monthly costs, but if you ever have to refer back to it, you also have your hours estimate in here if the customer wants you to break it down further, and you may, so you can always send this document to them. And then you got your raw requirements that were here. That was what you had as far as notes during the call itself. So I'm sure you have questions about this process. It's just kind of a tedious process sometimes, figuring out all the way from the initial conversation to the final solution. But all those pieces of due diligence is actually really important in this process. And you did see it was a little embarrassing that I made a mistake, but you know, those types of things actually happen. And I didn't actually want to edit that out because it's actually a valuable thing to see that if you do make a mistake, you can recover from it, right? So we spent a few extra minutes and we had to recover. Not a big deal. It shows you the value that, you know, also through a mistake, like don't close the browser windows out unless you're ready to be done. Also, make sure when you save as that you currently save the version that you're on. So for example, just to reiterate that last point, you know, if I was working on this document and you're like, you know what, I want to get rid of these 3 columns right here and save it as a different document, don't get rid of them and then save, right? You want to basically first save this as it is right now and then do a file save as to wherever location as a new name. And only once you're done with that do you want to actually take out the cells you want to get rid of. So those are all valuable lessons. I mean, I've done these 100 times and I still made a mistake. So if you do make a mistake, you know, don't beat yourself up over it. Just recover and move forward. So I hope this has been really informative as far as, you know, what customers have as far as monthly costs and also hardware costs, software costs, and then also professional services costs, which are all going to be part of the 2 documents that we send the customer and get signature on, which we'll be doing in the very next video. So again, if you have any questions, make sure to ask your trainer. Thanks a lot.